opening words are from Rumi this morning, one of my favorite spirit guides in writing. I always go to Rumi when I'm looking for something inspirational. There's a life force in your soul. Seek that life. There's a gem in the mountain of your body. Seek that mind. Oh, traveler, if you're in search of that, don't look outside. Look inside and seek that. Journeys when power and love beckon to you. If you can't go somewhere, move into the passageways of the self. They are like shafts of light, always changing, and you change when you explore them. You lack a foot to travel, then journey into yourself. That leads to transformation of dust to gold. And you, when will you begin that long journey into yourself? And now my great pleasure is to introduce to you Shey Khandro. And we'll call her Shey.
Perfect.
She is a distinguished artist and philosopher whose journey blends ancient wisdom with contemporary insights. Having studied and practiced as a Buddhist nun in the Tibetan tradition for 15 years, Shey has delved deeply into philosophy, spirituality, metaphysics, and modern science. Her decades-long artistic career in the sacred arts reflects mindfulness and compassion, with each dot in her vibrant pointillist paintings representing a prayer to end suffering. As a dedicated professional spiritual mentor and speaker, Shey passionately advocates for loving oneself, each other, and our precious planet. Her commitment to fostering a compassionate and connected world inspires individuals to embark on their own paths of self-discovery and inner peace. Shey invites us to join her in exploring the transformative power of mindfulness and compassion and experience their profound impact on your life. In my journey as a Buddhist nun, Shey shares her transformative shift from a worldly life to the monastic path with vivid stories and personal insights. And it is my exciting pleasure to introduce you to Shey Khandro.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for such a warm welcome. I am so excited to be here. I have to say, I come here from Sedona, Arizona, and many would consider this Sedona to be something of a spiritual mecca. And yet landing here, everybody I have met is open-minded, they're open-hearted, they're spiritually connected. Your community is just beautiful. And I have to say, it gives me great hope for our awakening world and as we walk towards a future of peace and compassion for all of us. And today I'm here to share something of my journey as a Buddhist nun and a sacred artist. I'd like to share with you some stories about how I met the Buddhist path, why I went all in, and woven into these stories will be some of the gifts and the practices that have truly empowered my life. And I'd like to ask you a question, but before we do, let's take a moment just to center into this moment right now. I'd like to invite you to let go of any concerns about the past or the future. And if you're comfortable closing your eyes, please do. Also, if you want to just leave them, just gaze with a soft focus down your nose, that works out too. And we'll settle into this moment. Let's take a deep breath in. And as we breathe out, exhaling slowly, letting go of any tension that we might be holding in our bodies, our neck, our shoulders, our hands. And on our next exhale, let's release the weight of our body into our seat, arriving fully in the here and now. And with your eyes still closed, or with a soft focus, I'd like to invite you to put your hand on your heart and reflect on this. What if everyone you met wished for you the highest and best of everything? Your heart's deepest dream, your highest possibility. Whether it's your family, your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, strangers on the street. What if they saw the light of the divine within you? How would that feel? And what if you could offer the same in return? Not just to some people, but to everyone. On your next breath, feel that divine spark, that light shining within you, surrounding us, touching everyone around us. Let's breathe together for just a moment as we rest in this shared awareness. And taking another breath in, as we exhale, I want to invite you to slowly and gently open your eyes, allowing the light in and allowing your light to shine out. The Buddha taught that all beings want to be happy. What I have discovered on my journey is that we have the power to create a world motivated by loving kindness and compassion. A world where love is alive, where collaboration is the norm, where we care for ourselves, we care for each other, and we care deeply for our precious planet. All beings happy, free, and loved. It starts with each of us, one small act at a time, with each choice that we make, cultivating compassion in our hearts and in our minds. People often ask me why I became a nun. And I'm going to give you the short answer first. And the short answer was I was 29 years old at the time that I met the path, and I was in pain. I came into the world, into a loving family. I was happy, I was healthy, I was sensitive and artistic. Life was good. But as I grew, the world became more confusing to me. There seemed to be a lot of contradictions. There were a lot of sharp edges. It became a painful place. And as many young people, probably too many young people do, in my early teens, I reached for drugs and alcohol. And it was a rough road until I hit my early 20s and crashed solidly into my bottom. From there, thankfully, a loving hand reached out and guided me towards recovery. And I tell you, I grabbed that hand with both of my hands. I was ready for change. And I wanted to get in shape, and I started to exercise, and I started to run and bike and swim, and I was doing the Olympic-sized triathlons, and those are actually the small ones, but triathlons nonetheless. And the dramatic ups and downs of my life. Well, I actually, from the fitness side and the exercising and getting in shape, I still didn't find the answers I was looking for. And I began to reach for the American dream of material abundance also. And that too was letting me down. It did not hold the answers I was looking for. And while the challenging experiences of the previous decades had offered me many gifts, I would say the gift of resilience, the gift of resourcefulness, of courage. There were still some questions, deeper questions, that were alive inside of me. It was, what is this place? What is this world? What is life? Why are we here? Why are any of us here? I certainly didn't know why I was here. I'm sure that some of you have heard the phrase, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, appear she did. She walked right into my place of work. We became friends. We would go shopping, we'd go out to dinner, we would go dancing. She told me that she ran a Buddhist temple out in the Maryland countryside. It was out past Bethesda, the place where I was working at the time. I didn't really think anything of it. I thought, well, I'm in business sales, my sister's in accounting, and you run a Buddhist temple. Okay. But as friends, we began to talk a great deal about compassion, about the condition of our world, about living a life of purpose, about even sourcing our own strength from within ourselves. And something in me began to stir. It had never dawned on me that my answers to my questions might be found in my spiritual life. One day, she invited me to come out to the temple. She said it was out past the country club and before the polo grounds. So it was a beautiful drive out there. And I remember driving up the driveway and being struck by these colorful prayer flags that were lining the driveway and all around the property. They were blue and green and yellow and red and white, just blowing in the breeze. And looming before me was this big white colonial. And off to the right was a Buddhist monument that had to have been 3 stories high. I later learned it was a stupa, and maybe one day we can go into more in depth about stupas. They're kind of fascinating. But as I walked through the front door, I was first struck by the scent of incense. And then I noticed off to my left was what looked like an altar. There was a large Buddha statue there, and there were all these bowls lined up, and they were filled with water and flowers and candies, and there were crystals and candles and these beautiful turquoise and gold brocades that were cascading down the front. And on the walls around me were more brocades. They were framing these intricate paintings of images that I didn't recognize, at least not at that time. And I was greeted by these 2 women that had very short hair, and they were wearing burgundy robes and carrying prayer beads. They told me they were Buddhist nuns. It was at that moment that I learned that my friend was actually a tulku. And a tulku is an intentionally reincarnating Buddhist master. She was a Western woman that had been formally recognized and enthroned by the head of the Buddhist lineage, the lineage that we were a part of at that temple. And she was, as a teacher and literally a master who could reincarnate intentionally to come into the world to be of service. My ideas about her started shifting a little bit, but because the news of that event had traveled around the globe, it was a big deal. It was on major news channels and things like that. But where was I? But when she arrived, she took me on a tour of the temple, and I began to meet some more of her students, and I met more of the ordained. I met some of the lay people, and I remember feeling there was this whisper inside of me, there you are, I've been looking for you, as though this was my community. I wanted to know more, of course. At that point, I started to attend the regular Sunday teachings where people from all walks of life would come. People of different faiths would come to learn about the principles of Buddhist philosophy. I would go to the evening practices, and these were a little more traditional. And there was a lot of chanting, and they would keep time with the bass drum, and then there were ceremonies where they were offering incense. And I started to participate in their 24-hour prayer vigil. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, there was somebody praying for peace in the prayer room at this temple. I think maybe now it's been going on for like 40 years. I also started to volunteer for some of the projects at the temple. There was 65 acres across the street, and they were developing it with walking trails and gardens and places for people to go and meditate, and it was just in the early stages of that. But then things started to really get exciting because these Tibetan teachers would come. And if you know anything about the history of Tibet, back in 1959, the Chinese invaded and ran the Tibetans, many of them, out of their country. In fact, many of the great teachers, they ran with the teachings and all the sacred objects. They were trying to preserve their tradition. And many of these teachers ended up here in the United States. Well, they started coming to the temple. And they were offering these teachings and these elaborate ceremonies. They were empowerments that were intended to ripen the seeds within each of us to also live from a place of compassion and ultimately to attain enlightenment. And we took a deep look at the suffering that is inherent in life. We looked at the conditions around the globe. We were also, I have to pause on that one for a minute. When you take time to really look at the conditions of our world, it can break your heart. The whole experience was surreal, and it was completely transformative for me. My heart began to open, and of course, at this point, I had never considered taking ordination myself. It was the late 80s. I had big hair, I had sculptured nails, I had a snappy wardrobe. Ordination was just really not for me. Until one day, about a year later, I was sitting, we had a visiting teacher from Tibet. His name was Yongtong Tulku Rinpoche. And he was this wizened old man, and he was sitting humbly up on this ornate throne, and he was teaching about love and compassion and patience and kindness. Well, it turns out he had been imprisoned and tortured for 27 years. And he was talking about compassion for his perpetrators and his concern for the suffering that they were causing for themselves with the seeds that they had planted and the actions that they had taken. That blew my mind. I thought, I want what he's got. I was like, I want to be able to respond to the harshness of the world with kindness and with patience. A world that's fraught with pain and confusion. I wanted to be a source of compassion in this crazy world that we find ourselves in. I was felt so inspired. Could I stand in the world as a light of love? I made the decision right there that I was going to offer this life in the service of enlightenment, mine and yours. 3 days later, I was early in the morning and I was out on the land working up a sweat. I was clearing some trails and hauling some brush. And someone comes running excitedly out. I think I need a tissue. Excuse me a second. Someone comes running excitedly out and they're saying, Rinpoche's giving vows and he's asking about you. My heart leapt in my chest. It's not like I told anybody, And so I hopped on the back of this tractor. We rode out of the woods. My hair is blowing behind me. We're heading up that driveway towards that big white mansion. And and the prayer flags were flying and my heart was pounding. And I got to the front door of the temple and I paused. And I took a deep breath. I took my work boots off and left them outside. And as I went inside the temple, and as I went into the room where Rinpoche was, I was offering prostrations. And I respectfully kneeled down in my jeans and my yellow Benetton sweatshirt. And I took my first level of ordination vows in a simple, solemn ceremony that would completely change my life. When I walked out of the room, my teacher met me with my first set of Buddhist robes. And the ordained community opened their arms wide and they helped me figure out how to put them on. It's a thing. It was time to cut my hair. I ended up selling my condo and moving into a small monastery. I breathed this sigh. My heart felt like it was home in that moment. And I really felt like I had been born for this. It felt so aligned to me. And now I was 30 years old. And I felt alive with a purpose and with passion. But I'll tell you, it was not an easy path, really. It wasn't a simple path. All of my worldly concerns did not just fade away. We worked out in the world. We worked to support ourselves. We worked to support the temple. We maintained the liturgical calendar, as well as our own daily practice that often involved many hours. We were responsible for the 24-hour prayer vigil and making sure that there was always somebody in there taking care of that. The development of the land was ongoing. We were creating contemplative gardens and putting in prayer wheels. We began building stupas, and I also began to discover my gifts as an artist and began studying the sacred arts at that particular time. And we also were reaching, as you guys do, out beyond the community of the temple and into the greater community. We were embracing the diversity of the many people that were coming to the temple to learn more about Buddhism. We studied Eastern philosophies, we studied metaphysics, we studied modern science and how that applies. There's so much support in those ideas these days, which is very exciting. We were studying the nature of mind, the nature of our very existence, what is at the root of our individual suffering and our collective suffering. And, how do we really cultivate lasting compassion, lasting loving kindness and patience in our own lives and support others in doing the same? How do we catalyze change for the benefit of all? We trained our eyes to see and our hearts to feel the spark of the divine that lives within each of us. We trained our ears to hear the cries of suffering without turning away in fear or in judgment. We trained our voices to speak of compassion and kindness. We took action on behalf of our enlightenment and the enlightenment of others. Together, we stood tall for a more peaceful and compassionate world. All beings happy, free, and loved. I find great joy in the memories of those ideas. And not just the memories, but the aliveness that still remains in my own heart. I was ordained for 15 years and have, after that point, had returned to lay life and continue to practice. My mind had opened. My heart had softened. I had clarity and direction. It was as though everything changed. And 35 years later, I still continue to peel back those layers in my own personal journey. And while I had found great benefit in practicing as a nun, one thing I know for sure is you do not have to shave your head. You do not have to change your wardrobe. You don't have to go off to a monastery or even meditate on a mountaintop to practice the deep, profound, transformative teachings of the many great masters that have walked this earth. We have the opportunity, and I think you know this too, to practice right where we are. Each moment is an opportunity for us to choose compassion. Each moment is an opportunity for us to cultivate self-awareness and to renew our own habits. We have the power to choose how we're going to respond to this world. It is my prayer that we will intentionally hold space for something new in this world gone wild. That we seed our thoughts and our words and our deeds with kindness and compassion. That we care for ourselves, that we care for each other, and that we care for our precious planet. In the words of Mahatma Gandhi, we can be the change we want to see in the world. And in closing today, I'd like to invite you to join me in the prayer of St. Francis. I believe it's in your program. Thank you. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. Do we have time for a Q&A?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I also want to point to this little card that I had made for you. This is a piece of my artwork, you might have guessed. Every dot, a prayer for peace in our world. And on the back of the card, you can find my website if you want to get in touch or reach out or learn a little more. This is a QR code on here. If you're familiar with those, you can take a picture with your digital device, and it'll take you right to a page where you can find something about my newsletter or regular meditations that I lead, or just find some more information about this goddess here.
Thank you for leaving that behind.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure there are questions and comments. It's wonderful.
You are all beautiful. Thank you. You were so attentive.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Could you speak to us about bullies?
Bullies. Yes, thank you for that question. That's a great question. We gotta love them. I think that all of us, when we are not at our best, we're acting out of our pain. And when somebody does act in a way that seems inconsistent with love, I love what is quoted from the Course of Miracles. If it's not love, it's a call for love. And that can sometimes be the hardest thing. Because we hear something like that, and we feel that energy coming at us, and we want to push back. You know, we're in a culture that kind of blames, and we have this crazy idea that war solves problems. Of course, it doesn't. But I think we'll figure it out one of these days. But so I want to say that it's always important to get yourself to a safe place. If you're in danger, if you're in physical danger, move away. But if you can also move away with the intention of trying to see their light and hold space for something that's new. Does that answer your question? Was there something more you want to say about that? Is it a particular circumstance?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Shey, could you tell us more about the intentional reincarnation?
Yes, I can. From a Buddhist perspective, when we are part of the cycle of death and rebirth. We are born, and it's based upon the form that we take, the family we land in, the circumstances we're in, right down to every bit of our physical form is determined by the seeds that we ourselves have planted in previous lives. The condition of our mind at the time of our passing. And then we will go through what's called the bardo state. And then depending on how that goes, is where we'll end up landing in our future lives. Those who have accomplished awakening, those who are truly enlightened from a Buddhist perspective.
Shey, Oh, hi.
I was born with three consciousnesses, I tell people. Not really connected to who I am as myself, but more my consciousness. And then there's a divine consciousness that's behind all that.
Yes.
And I kept it quiet all my life. It was something I dare not tell anybody. I was raised Roman Catholic, and it's like they put the cross and try to exercise me if I was telling them what I was experiencing. But I wound up in a camp at Damp up in upstate New York at one time, and I came across the teachings of Tilopa and Naropa and Dorje and all these great masters you're talking about.
Yes.
And it's a blueprint to how I saw the world.
Yes.
And when I'm connecting to intention, the world becomes what I want it to become. And when I connect to not to the discord that's all there, then that becomes bigger. And so I've spent my time since then, which is a good 20 years ago, going around telling people to tap inside, get out of the head. Behind the head is a miraculous world where you do see divinity in almost everything. And I just want to see how, I've never been a Buddhist, so to say, where I go to other Camp Tampas because I get lost in the deities and all that stuff. But the teachings I'm connected to is just stop it all. Just stop thinking, stop connecting, and there'll be a consciousness that comes above it. So I just want to know your experiences on that and how.
Oh my gosh, I love you've articulated that so beautifully, Jeff. I am of that mind, myself, this idea that our intentions are very powerful and that they do connect to and lead to our the results that we feel, that we experience in our lives. And what's really exciting about that is those are the ancient teachings. Those are the teachings of many great masters, that we have more to say about our experiences than we may realize. We are never a victim to our lives. And oftentimes what circumstances do arise are an opportunity for us to maybe reach a little farther than we might normally find ourselves reaching. But one of the things I was going to say that I find so exciting is a lot of science today is backing up these ideas. In fact, the Dalai Lama, it seems like such a terrible thing, the diaspora of the Tibetan people. I mean, their country has literally been wiped off the map. It was one of the greatest gifts I could have received, and I think many of us. The Dalai Lama is out in the world. He is not, cloistered away in the Himalayas. He is meeting with scientists all over the world, and they are discerning, they're looking at the brains, they're considering these ideas. And in Buddhism, unlike some faiths where it's like, this is what was written, and so this is what is true. In Buddhism, if something comes up that disproves what they have always believed, they will change it to align with the new truth. And so the opportunity to hear some of what is being discovered, not just through a scientific voice, but through a spiritual voice, I found to be very empowering in that way. Diana.
I wonder why you are now a former nut. What was your motivation to become a former?
There it is.
Diana,
Thank
hold
you
on.
for that. That's usually my.
We want to hear the question.
Okay.
I was asking what Shey's motivation was for becoming a former nun.
Thank you for asking that question. I usually get the why did you do it and why did you stop? Yeah, it was an interesting thing. One of the things that I have learned on this journey for sure is to listen to my heart. It is wiser than I tend to be on my own. And there was this point where I remember so clearly I was sitting outside among the trees, and I just got this vision came to me of seeing all these heads, the tops of people's heads, and mostly women, and they were crying. And there was a part of me that was like, it's time to go. Get up off your cushion and get out into the world. And it wasn't that it was time for me to come and tell you how it is, you know? It was really, the call felt like, let's be in and among and lift each other up. We share our experiences, as they say in AA, our experience, strength, and hope. And so I felt, and I have to tell you, when that thought arose, I was like, huh? No, wait, what? Because I felt like I'd gotten married. This is what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. But the call was so significant. And during my early years, I remember conversations with my Buddhist teacher, and she was saying, I wonder what my students are going to do with these teachings. And I don't know if that was what she meant, but what I felt was that was what I felt called to do at that time. So it was like up off my cushion and out into the world. And of course I could have done that in robes in some ways. But I do say that there are times when I would meet people in my robes with my shaved head, and you know, the response was like, weirdo. You know? or sometimes people would even go so far as to put me up on a pedestal. And you know, don't do that. We can't do that to each other. We'll fall. I know I would fall off and break, and so it just wouldn't serve any of our needs. So, yeah, that was why I did that. And then even as an artist, I've spent many years studying and working as an artist, and you spent a lot of time alone in your studio, and there was a point just a few years ago when I was looking at 60, and I'm thinking, okay, well, the first few decades were kind of a mess, and then the last few decades have been really good. You know, what are you going to do with this next few decades? Of course, if I get them, and this is what I wanted to do. It was out of your studio and into the world to share these
I'm making an executive decision that we're already over, but I think we're all so mesmerized. We're gonna stay, but if you need to leave, feel free to leave. But if you want to continue with questions and answers, if that's okay with you, Shey.
Sure, so I guess I'm staying.
We'll take you off the pedestal and let you be your own stuff.
I feel that. I feel that welcome here, and I feel so aligned with your ideas and your philosophies, and it makes me very grateful to have an opportunity to share those stories with you, because I know you're going to hear them.
First, I want to comment that your energy flows.
Thank you.
And I feel it.
Thank you.
I have 3 questions. You spoke with the Dalai Lama, who went to Dharamshala to retreat from Tibet. Has your journey taken you there to study? That's my first question.
Should I answer it first?
Sure.
Okay, that might be easier. I have not. I have not traveled there. I have met the Dalai Lama, and I have sat in teachings with him, and it has been a profound impact. And when I first started telling my story, I thought, oh, this doesn't sound right. You haven't even been to Tibet. And then I realized that I was actually born for this time. I studied with a Westerner who embodied those teachings. I was born and raised in America. And I just feel like this is where I would flourish and be able to be of the most benefit.
Thank you. You spoke of enlightenment. And this is maybe a compound question, not my third question. Compound question. Is your understanding of enlightenment today the same as what was when you were in Buddhism?
Oh, that is such a great question. Because that is a topic that's very hard to get your mind around in any real sense. You know, it's because it's considered to be an indescribable kind of state. And I know in the early years, it was really just about settling my mind down and even being able to manage my emotions in a way that wasn't about suppressing them, but was just about being present for those things. I do think that emotional intelligence does need to be taught in our schools. That would be really great. But it's just a little thought. So I think that over the years, that my understanding of enlightenment has actually deepened and broadened, because it's different from any different perspective. And I'm going to say at this time that I don't even still consider myself necessarily a Buddhist. I don't identify with a particular faith at all. And I made that choice very consciously, because the conversation I want to be involved in is, can we love? And if I'm standing in a group of people and people are saying, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Catholic, I'm Jewish, and someone else is saying, I don't believe any of that stuff, then all of a sudden we're talking about our differences. And we're not talking about what I've come to believe is the power tool of all time, but maybe even particularly of this time, and that's, can we choose love every time, in every moment, no matter what? And so that's been my personal directive, and if I can just do that, I think that I am on that journey of enlightenment.
You just neutralize differences among us. Love.
Yes, right, if we can get that right, then we can talk about anything. I don't care what we talk about. You know what I mean? We can explore differences, but can we love? That feels like a really,
Thank you, Shey. I'll pass on my third.
You mentioned earlier about your teen, early 20s struggle with drugs and alcohol. And, many of us believe that everything happens for a reason. How did that struggle that you have impact you in later life, in your view of things, or your own struggles or your own strength?
That's a beautiful question too. Thank you. I carried a great deal of shame and guilt for a long time for the choices that I had made and for the impact it had on others. And as I began to cultivate some grace for myself, and I began to recognize exactly what you're saying, that everything happens for a reason, I was able to find some of the gifts in there. I remind myself regularly of the resilience that came from that. And as I mentioned, the resourcefulness and even the courage to stand and make choices that might not be consistent with what everybody else would be doing. But I think probably one of the most powerful things that came from that was recognizing the pain of others, the empathy that I could cultivate for the idea that for many of us the world is confusing, and many of us make poor choices from time to time, and we carry shame and guilt and any kind of feeling that we are somehow broken, and we are not broken. We are the light of the divine, every single one of us. And so I think that was important. I think it was really important that I had that experience. I'm sorry for the pain that might have caused my mother who's hearing this today.
I think we will. I have to share an image that I had while I was watching you guys listen to